As we wind down draft season, players are moving up and down the real boards. We're going to get into the least scenario that we could have seen coming today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends, family, friends, and neighbors. It is our second to last mock draft Monday that we're going to rip apart and take apart at the seams about how this kind of scenario could happen. Very excited. We'll have next week on Mock Draft Monday as well. Later this week, we're going to talk about the free agency possibilities that are still left. What could happen in the way that this team comes together with Matt Derrick on Wednesday, and on Thursday, we're going to give you some trade scenarios, some things that could still be out there as well. But today it is the Mock Draft Monday. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, where you can get the draft guide from Rogue APC. It has all my athleticism matrix, all the production matrices, as well as our film grades. You want to check that out, go to rogueapc.com and use the code Matrix LOC, and you can get your discount. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make another Locked On show your next listen, because there's a ton of them, and we're all getting ready for this draft. We appreciate it. You can like, sub, and hit the bell anywhere on YouTube, as well as all the audio platforms. Let's get into this. You can also find some work at NFL33.com, as well as RGR Football. A lot to cover here today.
There's a lot to cover, and I'm Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. And I have to ask a question, because one of the things that happened on Friday, right after our show went up, was they re-signed Justin Watson to a 2-year deal. So I'm curious, did that affect your thoughts going into this draft?
It didn't necessarily affect my thoughts, but I didn't feel like I had to cover any drastic bases. I tried to let this week's mock draft just kind of come to me. I tried it on multiple platforms. I tried it on every popular engine there is, with the same concept of, I'm not going to trade out. I'm just going to let everything come to me, and let's see what actually happens. Because, like you said, with the return of Justin Watson, I think it takes a little bit of emphasis off of what they have to have at the wide receiver spot. I'm not saying that they shouldn't draft a receiver. I'm saying that the Chiefs are likely more comfortable with their wide receiver core right now than we are. And so while they will make an acquisition, I don't know that it has to be, full pedal to the metal to get it done.
No, and I agree with you. I do think that that's kind of the case that we're sitting in right now, is that Kansas City has gotten to a point where they've really filled a lot of their holes. I mean, we could still talk about needing a tackle, needing a wide receiver, needing a D end. But quite frankly, at this point, depth is pretty much taken care of, and you don't really have to reach for players at this point, which is really where you want to be going into draft weekend.
And it's something that we've seen Brett Veach do the last couple of seasons, and it's not that it's all-star players. Like you said, Justin Watson is kind of like, oh, you can take a breath and feel a little bit more relaxed about what you're going to have, right? Because you know that he knows the system. You know that he can put out in the system and be able to contribute. And I think that sets the floor. And I think, honestly, when you're looking at a room that has lost so many players, I think the floor is probably the fans' concern more so than the top. I think the organization is looking to build a room that you feel can be functional, and then if they get the opportunity to add something on top of it, they will.
Agreed. And so that gets us to a point where we're sitting here looking at this draft, and quite frankly, I'm sitting here looking at your draft going, that would be quite the pick at 31. So let's just go ahead and get into it and talk about your first pick of this draft. How did you feel about how this draft went for you?
I was pretty surprised. I was happy with the selection I was able to make. I was surprised that they were available when they were. And that starts at the very top. And this is something that we've been hearing that I would have told you was crazy 3 months ago. Because I had Myles Murphy as not only my best selection in terms of like the second half of the first round, some people had him in the top 10. And that is just because he is a guy, one of the few that fits Spag's system for me. He plays with power. He has a good first step. He's not always as explosive as he's capable of being on film. And I think that inconsistency, while it might be something other people are getting a little nervous about, and we'll see where they are lately, for the Chiefs, we know that that's something they feel they can counteract. This was the same concept that most people had of Chris Jones when he was selected in the second. No offense, but the 31st selection is a second-round pick in terms of grade. I only have right now, and my board is not fully stacked. I will put that out to the public the week before the draft on NFL33.com. Go get subbed over there so that you can get it. It will be one of the free posts, but you do have to be a sub to get the email and know that it's out there. But at that point, it's like I only have 18 right now on my first round. So if there's anybody outside of that, they're basically a second round pick. And what we've seen lately is from Daniel Jeremiah to Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, who do agree, last show that I heard, is that Myles Murphy is not necessarily a first round guy right now on every team's board. There are some there he is a second rounder. And so for him to be available at 31 when the Chiefs picked in this scenario, I was actually not only pleasantly surprised that it seems to be reflecting what we're hearing about the real evaluations, but it's something that I've been talking about the last maybe week or two that could be a reality that would actually fit what the Chiefs want to do. So I grabbed him up. The edge from Clemson, Myles Murphy becomes a Chief.
Yeah, and when you start looking at edges in this class that really fits Spags' system, the other one was Tyree Wilson. That would be a guy that you consider in the first or second rounds. I mean, there might be a couple others, but those are the top two. So he obviously fits the system. I think that would be a great pick if Kansas City could get that as their first pick at 31, not having to move up. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a situation where you got the positive with the negative. Part of the reason he was there is because a bunch of tackles went early. So the offensive tackle group was not as plentiful, and this made that a pretty straightforward situation.
Yeah, and that makes it, when you get to a point where you have that scenario play out that way and you are sitting there, you try to take the best player available. And in this case, it worked out for Kansas City. It still is a position of need. And I would almost argue that unless you have 4 DNs that you think could start on most teams, you probably could afford to take a DN in the first couple of rounds every single draft. You always need pass rush.
For sure. I think the interesting thing here is, had he not gone, to say he went the pick before, I think for the Chiefs, the next thing is going to be, obviously they're looking at offensive tackle, and we've talked ad nauseum about the wide receiver group. I think the hidden pick that could be the next thing on their block is they might have a defensive interior tackle that might be highest on their board or the next guy to fall. So that's something to keep in mind for next week and for when we cover the draft.
Yeah, didn't they have Maisie Smith from Michigan in on a top 30 visit?
I do believe they did.
So something to look at there, possible scenario for 31. But I want to tell you about our friends over at Ultimate Football GM. I absolutely love this game. This is a lot of fun. One of the things that I have always liked talking about and being able to do is acting like a GM, talking about what I would do if I was going to draft players, what I would do to sign players. And this is what this game gets you to be able to do. You've heard us talk about this mobile game app for a while. And if you've ever thought you'd make a good GM, you've got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. And I can tell you from experience, it is very hard. Won a couple of Super Bowls when I was playing this, but it took a lot of practice trying to get through to that point. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, injuries, player personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go or as you want, where and when you want to. Locked On Chiefs listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. So here we are, and you have solved the Chiefs' DN problem, at least for this season.
Just start with, sure. Gave it another option. I think with Charles Omenihu there, you're looking to supplement. It doesn't have to be a 1-for-1, and it doesn't have to be a situation like George Karlaftis was in, where he came in and he started and he was a mainstay and he put in all those reps. You have the ability here to, I think, bring a guy along into the system. And Murphy also, just like Omenihu, just like Mike Dana, can go inside and play down to the 3-tech if they want him to. And so I think it fits the scheme of being able to be versatile and move everyone around the defensive front.
So where'd you go from here?
Then it was really interesting to watch the run that came, and there was a lot of wide receiver in the second round. There was a few more tackles that went off, but in the end, this started a piece where in the middle of this draft, I was in a situation where I was getting the last guy at a tier. You can see on the draft board, and when it comes out, I think it'll be very clear to everyone that there are groups, there's clusters, there are tiers, whatever you want to call them. And I kept coming in at the tail end of one. And so what I was able to do in the second round was pick up a player that I actually have rated above DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. I have him above Blake Freeland, another left tackle, above Braden Daniels, who I actually really, really like, but also another left tackle type guy. And he's the last of the second tier. It is Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse, a guy that is, I think, right now rated right around this area, and it is about correct. I have him slightly above. I have him just in the high 50s. And so for me, this was a value pick in that it matched what I've seen on film and what his athleticism shows you. He has a couple of issues. He doesn't actually keep his hips and his trunk controlled together a lot. He has a tendency to get leaned out at times where his feet are quicker than his upper body can, and he gets him into some bad positions. Andy Heck has some work to do, but I do believe that he is a guy that can stay at tackle. He doesn't have super long arms. He's kind of on the fringe there. So at the very worst, if we get 2 seasons down the road and it hasn't worked out and Joe Thuney's contract comes up and Joe's either to the point where he's ready to retire or they don't complete it, he can slide to left guard and be a guy that is completely viable inside as well. So I think that kind of took care of the fact that if I waited any longer, it was going to be a 4th or a 5th tier tackle here to try and supplement the tackle group.
And where are you seeing Jalen Duncan in this group? Is he in the second tier or is he in the third tier?
I have Jalen Duncan quite a bit down below. He is a 4th round grade on my board. Okay. This was the bottom of the second, obviously. And then I've got Freeland Daniels and Tyler Steen, who isn't necessarily a fit for the Reed system. But on the board, I rate them across the league. So if you're a power team, Tyler Steen would be an option.
Gotcha. So where'd you go from here? You picked up an offensive tackle that could play. I'm guessing you would start him at right, would be my guess. Or do you think he's
I think Bergeron, you would try him out at left. I think you would see what you have and go through the OTA process and see how you feel about it, leaving Juwan Taylor at right and let him just kind of stay home for now, knowing that if you get through OTAs and it gets to May and you don't think that it's gelling yet, you can come into camp and switch him.
Well, the nice thing about what you said about Bergeron is it's a technique issue, and he has one of the best O-line coaches in the NFL to be coaching.
Agreed. That goes a long, long way.
It does.
So I came back, and again, no trades in this draft, just letting things fall. And so you saw players that I think are the best area to get an X receiver in particular in this draft is on day 2 in the 3rd round. Saw Cedric Tillman go off the board, saw A.T. Perry come off the board, and then a guy that's been getting a lot of fan questions lately, and that I finally got some good film on, was able to review him, and I put him in this group. He's part of that cluster, and he is, again, the last guy in the X cluster in the 3rd round after Tillman and Perry. This is Jonathan Mingo from Mississippi, and you played with Jackson Dart last year. I like Jackson Dart, but he's young. He's crazy. He needs to settle down, right? So you can't necessarily judge production for Mingo by the quarterback. And so I do think that he looks a little lackluster to compare to some of the other possibilities here at the wide receiver spot. Now, there was a little bit of room there to go interior on the O-line, but I didn't think that was a prospect. There was a couple of corner prospects that I thought were solid at that value, but of the positions that the Chiefs do need to fill or do have a gap in, he was clearly the guy here. So at 95, select Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver from Mississippi, and add to that room some size and some speed and yak ability more than anything.
Yeah, and you've taken all 3 of the positions that really need to be filled in this draft, and you filled them in the first 3 rounds. I think you got to feel pretty good about that. And quite frankly, I'm not going to say he's going to go a lot higher, but I have seen Mingo talked about going even at the end of the first round and being even maybe a high 2nd round guy at times, just because people are starting to see the traits that he has, which is really what you're talking about with a guy like that, because you can't see the skill set on the field near as much because of the guy he's playing with. but you can see traits, and you're trying to extrapolate, figuring out what you think he can do in the league.
Exactly. And it's got to be something you can see fitting into the offense with Kadarius and with Sky, et cetera, et cetera. And I like the fit.
Okay. Well, and when we get back, we're going to talk about rounds 4 through 7. So we will be getting to that just after this. All right. So 4th round, where'd you turn around and go?
It was pretty clear that it's now free for all. I was considering running back. There were 2 guys on the board that I like that could be, a 1-2 punch with Pacheco. But there were also a number of guys that were going to be there in the 5th and in the 6th. And I decided in the end, even a UDFA is going to be able to fit into this concept of a committee. And I think the Chiefs will be more of a committee than maybe they want to be right now. Pacheco took over, but you still had Jarek in the mix, right? I think Jarek could still come back. So I went back to more core needs, and I wanted to shore some things up. A favorite of mine fell all the way to 122 and was available. I didn't expect that. Moro Jomo, the interior D lineman from Texas. I actually like him paired with Murphy quite a bit because I think they can help each other grow, and I think their games can actually play off of each other quite a bit. When I did my evaluation cycle on my watch list, they were right next to each other as guys that could play inside and out. And if I needed somebody to come in and be a guy that filled gaps for an established defensive line, they were both on that list. So I grabbed Morrow, and I was happy to do it. I don't think he actually lasts that long, to tell you the truth. So this is another one where he was available at the bottom of a tier that I don't think will be recognized in reality. Came back 12 picks later. And this is a position that I think a lot of people are wondering about. Could there be a talent available at 31 that the Chiefs can't ignore at the tight end position? I don't think that's necessarily the way that it goes down. But at 134, when you have the guy that ends up being the best tight end in the athletic matrix, that is Luke Schoonemaker from Texas. I'm sorry, from Michigan. Moro Jomas from Texas. I just couldn't pass it up because at the end of the day, you put it all together. He's got a great film grade. He's number 3 on my film. I'm sorry, and he's number 2 in the athletic matrix, right behind Zach Kuntz. Can't really get away from Kuntz, but Kuntz is he's a project and a half. He's a quarter of where Demetrius Harris was when he joined the roster. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Schoonemaker rolls in, can play H. He can line up in the backfield if you need him to. We'll talk about the fullback needs and what the versatility is. He lines up in line. He's a solid blocker, and he can split out. He plays it all. And I think he's really, really versatile to add to that room. I know there's like 17 tight ends in Kansas City right now, but I think he's a guy that lifts the floor of that room pretty well.
I can't disagree with you. I think that that's a great pick. And, I have been talking about this the entire time in this draft. When you have so many good tight ends, you need to be taking a guy. Yes, you have the best tight end in football, but he is older, and you're going to have to eventually replace him. And I'm not saying Schoonemaker can do that, but it at least gives you somebody there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is somebody that I think will fit into what they want to do.
I was just going to say the bigger thing for me is that this also gives them somebody that can learn from Kelsey. Again, like a Noah Gray.
Yeah. And because of his athleticism, and he improved through this process. His pro day was better than his combine. I think he showed that the way he was playing at Michigan is just a basis. It isn't his limitation. I think he can fit into a read system, and I think that he can grow pretty significantly and become somebody that can back up Travis long-term, depending on what happens with the other guys. Then I had to wait a bit. It was a full round down to 166, and this is the meat of that 4th tier, 5th tier area of offensive tackle. And so I was able to actually have my choice, and it came down to a couple of guys that I do like in that area. Jalen Duncan went just before this.
Okay.
So you did ask about him before, but I have Duncan, Wanya Morris, the right tackle from Oklahoma. That's Anton Harrison's bookend. And this guy, Warren McClendon, who is Broderick Jones' bookend at Georgia. I have them all right in the same cluster, just slightly ahead of Nick Saldivari, who I think was an option here as well. But I had 3 out of my 4 on the board. I took the top guy. It is McClendon. He started every game for both national championship teams at Georgia. Didn't give up a sack last season. Like, he's got a lot of things going for him. He's just not the typical really punchy, like super athletic. He's got good athleticism, but he's not as good as Broderick Jones is. He's probably a little bit more fleet of foot than say Dwan Jones, but he's not quite as good as Darnell Wright. He does have reach. He does have power. He's played in a system that I think lent itself to coming right into Kansas City and be able to contribute as a swing right now in case Lucas Niang is not able to go.
Which is absolutely a huge position that they absolutely need to fill at swing tackle.
And
so I like that pick.
On the left too.
Yep, there you go. And I like that pick. I think that gives you another offensive tackle that you can throw in there. Now you have three guys that you feel really good about. And maybe Kansas City feels good about Lucas Niang. We just don't know enough because we haven't seen him. But he had a horrible injury that he was coming back from and didn't really play much last year. So going to be something to watch going forward. Absolutely. Now we get into what is this, the 6th round?
Yes, we're coming in at 178. This is pure who's the best athlete, who's the best kind of who brings the juice, like Therese used to say, right? Who's bringing something to the party that is beyond his metrics and beyond his film. And it's Cameron Mitchell, the Northwestern corner. I like his game. He's proven that he can play against bigger, more physical receivers. I think that he's a guy that could fill it in. And as good as Najee Johnson's been on special teams, I think he's ahead of Najee Johnson on the field. And so that kind of level where you see all these rookies from last year that are going to play forward, and obviously with the Jerry's, you need somebody that isn't bringing up the rear that, it just is a wasted draft pick. Cam Mitchell being available here, I thought was a good sign. So I grabbed him and ran away laughing. And then we come back down to 217. And this is maybe controversial. I don't know. I thought it was pretty well prepared. Clayton 2 is QB2 in the Matrix. He can escape. He's athletic. He's gutsy. He needs some refinement. His accuracy isn't that great. His platform isn't great. Might sound like a quarterback that we drafted a few years ago that's ended up guiding us to 2 championships, right? But I like him as a guy who can come in and compete with Michelle. He's got that kind of moxie, that juice about him.
Yeah, obviously not the physical tools Patrick has, but somebody that Reed can get in there and work with, somebody that Matt Nagy can work with, and they can try to develop. And this is, we've talked about this multiple times. This is exactly what I'd like to see Kansas City do is, it's a 6th-round pick, but especially as we've talked about, they're not going to have 10 draft picks on this roster. This is maybe a position where you could get another draft pick on the roster because if you go and draft a QB and you want to develop him, you put him as your 3rd QB and he sits there for a year. I mean, that's the probable reality of it at this point.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think it's a reasonable risk. I do have to say, I have him on my board above Max Duggan, who was available, and below Stetson Bennett, who was available. But I've taken enough Georgia players the last couple of weeks. I decided to go back and change it up, and I went with Clayton too. Yeah. And that brings me to the really fun part. And I'm sorry to jump your gun. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's still questions about Stetson Bennett in the NFL, and that's viable. So I've actually been hearing a lot more about Toon, so I will be interested to see if he is available this late. QBs do not last. We know that for a fact, and we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be a 4th or 3rd round pick or anything like that, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone earlier than a lot of people have thought he would be.
But hey, there could be the next Brock Purdy in this group. Who knows? Let's take a stab at it.
That's where I am.
That brings us to Chiefs' last 2 picks, 249 and 250 back to back. And this is something that is, again, it's just, do they connect? Broderick Martin is a small school guy. He plays at Western Kentucky. And you guys know that I scout Western Kentucky all the time, going back to long before Bailey Zappi. But it's a program that has a tendency to get guys that are coming up to the NCAA level to get out of the rut that they were in. And I like Broderick Martin. The Chiefs have had him in for a 30 visit. And so I like the concept of a guy that gets off the ball pretty well. I won't say he's a polished pass rusher at this point, at least not from what I've seen. But he has some traits that I think the Chiefs like. And he could be another guy that ends up being like a Turk Wharton that is taken very, very low and has a high upside. And if he can reach it, it's gold that you're mining for free. So I decided to go for that. And then I came back with Derek Parrish. And this is not just a selfish fullback maneuver. You see that he's listed at edge, for those of you that are watching on YouTube. Derek Parrish is a true Ironman. He started as a fullback, and he has started as an edge at Houston. He has some of the best metrics in terms of pure pass rush win rate, as well as pressure percentage. That's important. Now, I'm not saying he's going to play edge. He may end up being a fullback. You don't know. Because here's the thing. He can line up at edge. outside linebacker, off-ball linebacker, fullback, H-back, inline tight end, and he can split out. If he was in the running back class, he would have the third best athletic matrix in this group. He ran a 4.09 short shuttle at 241 pounds.
So what you're telling me, yeah, what I'm hearing is versatility, which is something Kansas City loves.
Yeah, he's a core special teamer. Like I miss Mike Burton already, right? Like Derek athletically is an upgrade from Mike Burton, and he's going to play teams for you. He's going to be there in a pinch. He can do a little bit of everything on offense and defense. And I think he's a really, really unique prospect. You can bring in and just plug him in wherever you need him.
Well, and if he's a guy that actually can make the team as an edge, that gives you the ability to maybe not carry a fullback, which I know you wouldn't like, but it saves you a position. And if he has the ability to go in and play that position a couple of snaps a game, because quite frankly, Kansas City hasn't used a fullback a ton.
Yeah,
it's more of a core special teams guy. So if he has that ability, that's a huge plus for Kansas City because it gives them another roster spot where maybe they carry a fifth tight end, maybe they carry a fifth running back. I mean, a 10th offensive lineman. Who knows where they're going to go with it? But it does save them a roster spot.
Yeah, and in the end, that makes the roster stronger. And hey, when you're a Super Bowl champion, making that roster stronger is a tall order. If you can do that in any way, shape, or form, you need to do that.
Yep, agreed. I like this draft. I think that if Kansas City actually pulled this draft off, and I think they upgrade multiple different positions. Obviously, defensive end is going to be the first one. We'll see about Bergeron. I'm going to be curious just to see how he plays out in the pros. But I do like what you said that he could possibly move inside if it doesn't work out on the outside. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Jonathan Mingo, a wide receiver, I do like that move. Kansas City does need a legitimate X wide receiver. And quite frankly, the other side of that for Kansas City is with as unpolished as he is as a receiver, he doesn't have to come in and start right away. Mm-hmm. He may have the opportunity to start right away if he shows more than what we think he's going to be able to show, but he doesn't have to. Most rookie wide receivers in this organization don't start right away because they're trying to learn the system. So maybe that's even something that's going to work in his favor in that regard. So I really like this draft. I think that, you hit offensive tackle twice, you hit edge multiple times, you got a wide receiver, you got a tight end. A lot of depth.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this is a scenario where the Chiefs picked every pick that they have right here. Clearly there's opportunity to trade out, and maybe it doesn't end up being this many players. But if you're going to take them, make sure that they bring something that can help you and raise your floor. Okay. And I think this is a good job.
So I know we just got done with this mock draft. So with what you just said, I have to ask the question. How many picks do you think Kansas City makes during this draft?
Oh, that's a good one. I think they end up trading at least a pick away in order to move up.
Okay.
That may be the extent of it, quite honestly. That may be all they got. So what would that make? It'd be
9 picks?
Be 9, yes.
Yeah.
I think minimum they probably get away with 7 selections. If they really got hot about somebody or a couple of guys, they could trade away multiple picks. I don't think it probably ends up happening. We'll see.
I was going to say the over under. I think I'd put the over under at 7.5, and I'd probably take the over, but I really feel like the under could be possible.
Yeah, it's a tough call this year. What I am pretty confident about is I don't think they're going to take all 10 of these picks.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the other thing I would say is they may end up taking 10 picks, but I don't think they're going to stick where they are. Mm-hmm. I really think that Brett Veach saw something last year, and I think that it's going to be something that we're going to be watching over the next several years when he's building this roster, trying to figure out, okay, how can I use my picks the best? Does it make sense to trade back, get more ammo for next year, and continue to try to build a young roster? Is there somebody that we can maybe get a little bit later that's maybe just as good as the players that are available right now and pick up more picks for next year? I can see it.
Yeah, it could possibly happen. It all depends on the way that it falls, because I do think more than maybe the last 3 or 4 seasons in the draft, I think the clusters, the tiers of players are going to have enough runs that it may force the Chiefs into a decision that maybe they were hoping not to have to make.
Yeah, that's possible. And what I will say is that when you're sitting here in a situation where you literally just won the Super Bowl the year prior in a rebuilding year, you have the ability to sit back and go, okay, board's going to come to us. We're going to do what we think we need to do. And if it means trade back, it means trade back. I will say this. If they trade back, I will not be surprised, but I do not expect them trading back in the first round. I think if they're going to make a first round pick, I don't think it's a 31. I think they move up to go get somebody. And
Yeah,
that's how I feel right now, a week before the draft, or basically a week and a half before the draft.
We may hear rumblings. I kind of feel that way right now as well. We'll see if that stays true as we get to the run up. We may have more for you. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about, is there anything left that they could do in free agency to shore anything else up? They've had a lot of small additions lately. Matt will be here. Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. You guys know him very well. He'll be here on Wednesday to give us an update inside the building. What's going on? What's the buzz? Then Thursday, we'll come back. We'll talk about possible trades. There's a couple of things still out there that need to get done long term. Does that force anything now? And then we'll wrap it up as a fresh takeaway for what's going on right now on Friday. Then it's back to Mock Draft Monday. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Chris gets to do the final one of the season for next week. We're going to have a good time. If you would, please.
I was just going to say, the thing I'm really looking forward to is, I cannot believe it, but the draft is literally a week and a half away. And we will be in Kansas City. We will have more information coming for you as to where we will be and what we will be doing, but we will be in Kansas City, and I'm not sure when we're going to be there yet. I know, obviously, the whole draft, but not sure when you're going to get in town, and we'll talk about that later, but we will have more information for you on that.
Absolutely. Hope that you guys enjoyed this. Let us know your thoughts. Leave it in the YouTube comments below. Leave it in the Spotify and the Apple reviews. We would appreciate that as well. And please reach out to us on Twitter at Locked On Chiefs, at Chiefs Corner for Chris. I'm Ryan Tracy, NFL. You can always find me there. We have a ton going on. Go to Rogue APC. Get that draft guide. I have a huge update coming for the Athletic Matrix for all of the small incremental changes that happened in the pro days, as well as a couple of prospects like Jake Witt, Trevor Reed, who were not available pre-combine. You guys want to see those too, because 7th round flyers at tackle aren't necessarily a thing of the past either. So let's be ready. I hope you guys have a great Monday. Thanks for listening today, and we'll talk with you tomorrow.